Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, March 21st. Yep, 2025. And today we're talking why we love polycultures as a culture, sort of, interplanting with garlic, and it's Feedback Friday, so let's do it. All right, everyone. Happy Friday. This week, let's see, what did I do? I did a thing I don't normally do and have been telling you I don't normally do it, which is that I planted in the field in March. The soil in the tunnel where I wanted to transplant some lettuces still needed some work, so I called an audible and decided to plant a couple of beds of lettuce in the field where I had some pea cover crop in the fall, which died, raked it off, went ahead and planted. Planting outside should be fine at this point, but it's a little riskier, so I usually avoid it if I can. I threw some row cover over top just to protect it from the frost we're getting this morning. And barring some unlikely and unseasonably hard freezes or a mountain of snow, we should be good to go. Sometimes that's just the way it goes. When you neglect a tunnel. Anyway, it's Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where I look back at some of what you all were saying. On Monday, we discussed Three Sisters gardening, and I wanted to touch on this from @79poisonbreaker, who wrote, quote, "The biggest problem I see in the Three Sisters garden is modern people want sweet corn and green beans. Both of those are not Three Sisters friendly. The entire crop, in my opinion, should be storage foods, dry beans, pop or flint corn for milling, and winter squash. Small scale, I've had success with scarlet runner beans, glass gem corn, and butternut squash," end quote. So thank you. And to an extent, this is definitely correct, sorta. The storage crops are the intended goal of this style of agriculture, but also there is historically, and even today, a lot of green harvesting in the milpas / Three Sisters style of corn, beans, squash, etc. The goal certainly is food for storage, but one of the great things about almost all those crops is that they have multiple stages. So I say take every advantage of that too, especially keeping in mind that often pre-colonization, the size and scale was such that some missing ears of green corn were not the end of the world there. And also, yeah, they were delicious. You may as well eat a little bit of, sweet corn / green beans, etc. Well, you can. Why not? And I like this from @Deborah McSweeney3349, who wrote, quote, "As a seed carrier, mostly corn, for my people, I have learned so much about how amazing these older seeds and the knowledge of ceremony with them can be. I grow my corn in mounds, 4 to a hill, and then add beans that know how to climb corn, and then winter squash scattered amongst the mounds. Finding a bean that knows how to climb corn took me some time, but once you find them, they are like old friends that love to play together. It is a beautiful thing to witness. Again, Wado, for your respect and acknowledgments of our ancient culture that keep us fed for thousands of years before contact," end quote. Thank you, but I think that's just really cool to hear that you're carrying that on. And also, I love the image of the corn and the beans being like old friends at play. Love that. Thank you. And on Tuesday, we talked about wind and about the citrus industry. And this was interesting from @AliceWilliams9301, who wrote about the citrus industry. Quote, "Unfortunately, the monoculture is necessary for seedless fruit. Introducing diversity would be great for disease resistance and ecology, but people would have many seeds in all their citrus," end quote. Okay, so first, thank you for that comment. And technically, if someone is growing seeded oranges around you, you could end up with some cross-pollination, but that's not super likely, and you could map out a plan to grow a few different types of citrus and or other fruits that would not have that effect while also allowing for better ecology. So I don't think a monoculture is a necessity. However, even if that were totally true, like you could not have another type around, you had to plant only one type of citrus or it would completely ruin the fruit. When I am looking at these properties, dreaming of my winter citrus farm, which I do way too often, all I am seeing is bare ground. No ground cover, no flowering shrubs, no diversity under the canopy at all. Basically, even in a monoculture system, it is just a monoculture, like a single crop, not even weeds. Would things like a diversity of crops and flowering shrubs and plants complicate production? Maybe, sure. But also perhaps nothing complicates production like citrus greening and losing this farmland to development. So it seems like a reasonable trade-off to me to have some other plants involved. But I'll let you know when I finally get my winter citrus farm. It will never happen, but I can continue dreaming about it. On the wind part, lots of people sharing my love slash hate of wind, but I liked this from @EaglePointNF, who wrote, quote, "In ancient Chinese medicine, wind carries the 10,000 diseases. Wind was considered one of the evils. Like you said, wind creates tension, anger, and unrest. And wind enters through the neck primarily. Glad you're wearing hoodies. Protect your neck. And at the same time, wind helps to dry damp in the body. Obviously, balance is key, and medicine is all about dosage," end quote. Thank you. Now, I don't know anything about Chinese medicine, so this comment could be totally off base. I don't know, but I will take anyone at their word who justifies me wearing hoodies. For the most part, if a winter top doesn't have a hood and or pockets, it's a hard pass for me. Also, tension, anger, unrest, that's pretty spot on. All right. Then on Wednesday, we discussed the importance of shade, and I liked this from @McCraw4D, who wrote, quote, "About 5 years ago, I had a conversation with a master gardener at our local nursery about how their plants looked less stressed by the North Texas 100-degree Fahrenheit heat compared to the ones at our community garden. He said the secret, pointed up to the ceiling, get yourself some 30% shade cloth. I keep PVC hoops on my raised bed, so it was easy to toss over the hoops, just like frost cloth. My peppers started their full bloom 2 weeks earlier than all my neighbors. The following summer, I put it on once temperatures got to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and my peppers produced all summer with just a drop in production versus entirely shutting down until September. I use it all over my plots now." End quote. So yeah, great. Thank you for that comment. Especially in high heat environments, tomatoes and peppers will straight up quit on you and drop their blossoms. So shade can be a absolute lifeline for crops like that. And to be sure, it is for that reason that peppers and tomatoes are also among crops grown in milpa / Three Sisters under some small amounts of shade in hotter climates. Then Thursday, we had a Patreon question from someone from Denmark that in my head I switched to them telling me they were Dutch for some reason and showed some love to the Netherlands instead of to Denmark. So apologies for that to my Danish friends. And let's show some love to Denmark. The national Denmark team is one of the teams that uses red in Europe, but a good one. So we won't fault you for that after putting up an impressive 1-goal lead on Portugal yesterday in the Nations League in the first leg. So well done. The Danes are not quite the producers of produce that the Dutch are. They are more dairy and pork and seafood, it seems, but they produce a lot of it and export multiple times what they consume. The Danes are also doing a lot of interesting and innovative stuff in regenerative ag with maximizing space and encouraging regenerative sustainable practices that seem like they do not get enough attention. I feel like rarely do I ever hear from Danish growers, and that should change. So if you're a grower in Denmark, let us know what's good in your country. What should we be looking out for? What are some farms that we should be following? Also, shouts to my youngest son's favorite player from Brighton, Matt O'Reilly, who was not born in Denmark, but who plays for the Denmark national team. So apologies again. I will come visit one day and beg forgiveness in person, preferably at one of the many amazing restaurants there. That would be great. Also, don't worry, I will have an editor soon. So that should help. Lastly, loads of great comments this week about the ending of the No-Till Market Garden podcast and how sad it is, and it is sad. For those of you who don't know, for years we have produced several different niche farming shows, but the reality is that the way the revenue has changed via YouTube, and by changed I mean gone down a ton, and the increase in competition among several other factors, we could no longer afford to produce additional podcasts. So we still have one last show in the works so that you all will enjoy, but all the other shows are going independent now or shutting down, and along with them, the No-Till Market Garden podcast, which was my original podcast, which kind of started all of our podcasts. That said, I will make sure those independent shows stay on your radar, and I will still be here doing some interviews and stuff soon, especially once we get that editor. And the incredible growth of this show signals that perhaps we will, at very least, one day be able to support other podcasts or other things that people are doing, other content creation. But for the moment, we've had to cut back entirely, definitely in producing them, which is a bummer. It turns out that a business giving information away for free is a tough one. So we do appreciate all the Patreon support because that is a huge part of what makes this show possible at all. Otherwise, thanks for all of your great feedback and comments this week. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have a conversation about interplanting with alliums, or should you? BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Tilth Soil. Tilth Soil is a worker-owned co-op making living soils in Cleveland, Ohio using NOP-compliant food scrap compost. They wrote us, quote, "We're stoked to support Growers Daily because healthier, tastier, and generally more decent food systems start with growers like all of you, inquiring minds who care about the land." End quote. Love the folks over there at Tilth. If you're looking for top-notch compost or potting mix, drop an email to the folks at Tilth via info@tilthsoil.com. That's info@tilthsoil.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by So Right Seeds. So Right Seeds is an heirloom seed company that offers fresh, high-quality, open-pollinated seeds. They have a great selection on their website of over 400 varieties, along with a planter's library with tips for growing. They offer cover crops and bulk packs of seed for sustainable home gardening. The instructions on the back of their packets have all the information you need to get started. Go to So Right Seeds, that's SOW, and use my discount code NOTIL for 15% off your order. That's SoRightSeeds.com. All right, enjoy the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/NoTillGrowers. I try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Jesse Hammond. I love how many Jessies we have in our Patreon now. That's shouts to Jessies. Anyway, Jesse asks, quote, "What are your thoughts on interplanting onions with garlic?" End quote. Okay, so this is a fun question because garlic and onions seem like perfect plants to interplant with other crops, but unfortunately, they aren't really, or at least not really in bulb form. To explain, alliums are not very competitive crops, generally speaking. As I talk about in the Living Soil Handbook, every plant has what is called a critical period of competition, meaning that when the plant has an abundance of competition, either from weeds or other crops, at a certain point in its life, then it will have a physiological response that for onions tends to be grow really tall and not put your energy into creating a bulb. I remember that my buddy and one of my great mentors, Jeff Poppin, you would know as the Barefoot Farmer, used to grow the best onions. And when I asked him what the trick was, what he did differently than what I was doing, he said, no weeds ever. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I remember the way that he explained it sounds like he keeps his onion beds absolutely immaculate, especially in comparison to anything else he grows. And part of that is no doubt the moisture. Weeds will keep moisture around onion bulbs, which could lead to disease. But part of that is also the competition factor, the bulb size. The weeds will simply encourage the plants to put its energy into leaves and not bulbs. And the same thing goes for garlic. Those plants cannot tell the difference between a weed and a crop you desire. So in terms of garlic and onions, if a bulb is the goal, I don't recommend a direct interplanting. However, the critical period of competition response can be used to your advantage in the case of, say, green onions, also called scallions, where a tall green part of the onion may be the desired outcome. When our growing space was more limited, we used to plant green onions in between our lettuce, transplanting both of them at the exact same time. This meant we could double the crops out of those beds in this, basically using the same amount of space, like not spacing our lettuce any differently. It was a little complicated for harvesting and it was a lot of work up front, but the onions were nice and tall and slightly blanched. I am not a big fan of companion planting in general, meaning planting something just to help the other crop and not necessarily as a crop itself. But alliums have been shown to have positive effects on diseases and pests in crops like strawberries when planted together. Again, if you do plant them with something like strawberries, don't expect much of a bulb from the onion, but you can get green onions or green garlic, plus the obvious ecological bonus of protection from the allium. Most other crops are not quite the sensitive divas that alliums are, and may even benefit from that little bit of shade from sunshine scattering on the tall onion leaves like we discussed earlier this week in the shade episode. Shade being another reason I like interplanting. Anyway, I hope that answers your question. Maybe more on critical period of weed control or critical period of competition later. Otherwise, let's do one last quick break, and when we come back, we'll get polycultured. Sure. Be right back.
Drive the same roads every day. We both get there our own way. Thistle and an apple tree. How different two souls can be.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Harnois Greenhouses. Arnois Greenhouses has pioneered controlled environment agriculture since 1965, partnering with market gardeners and farmers across North America to deliver turnkey greenhouse solutions. Their unwavering mission is to support growers' success through innovation and expertise in design, manufacturing, and installation. Arnois Greenhouses are engineered to withstand high wind and snow loads, providing optimal brightness, increased yields, rapid ROI, and long-lasting durability. With over 20,000 projects completed, they are more than a manufacturer. They are a trusted partner. Their structures foster sustainable, energy-efficient ecosystems that drive profitable, resilient agriculture. In 2025, Arnois is introducing a new low-tech, high-tunnel model starting at just $2 per square foot, offering open field growers an accessible entry into controlled environment agriculture. Learn more at arnois.com. That's HARNOIS.com. All right, back to the show. All right, so one of the things that came up this week was similar examples to the Three Sisters / Milpa agriculture all over the world. Like this from @Ben_Hymick_Snipes 9625, who wrote, quote, "When I worked with Church World Service in East Africa, I worked with farming communities in Rwanda who grew endless fields of Three Sisters style farms. They also grew fields of tomatoes without any trellising, just vining on the ground. So part of the benefit was growing without much infrastructure. Since they had rainforest levels of rain, they could have success without much infrastructure. They just had to figure out nutrient and soil health. Created a beautiful terrain of green rolling hills." End quote. There was another person who had mentioned seeing interesting combinations of crops similar to the Three Sisters in the Philippines as well. I think a lot about photos I saw from Malaysia of really diverse croppings of rice and various trees and other crops all planted on a terraced hillside or in small blocks. I guarantee that everyone listening to this has, no matter what your origins are, somewhere deep in your history, polyculture, agriculture of some kind. Even those of us who are, like me, if you cannot tell by my skin tone and love of soccer, of European descent, have really diverse cropping systems in our heritage somewhere. There are really great examples of polyculture systems, for instance, all around the Mediterranean, where olive trees, grains, and grapes were cultivated with the use of livestock. There's ancient evidence of not just various, cereal grains, but also hazelnuts and other crops along with livestock being produced together in prehistoric England. Fire was used. Numerous plants were employed medicinally. All that style of agriculture, which for a long time was just called hunting and gathering, ridiculously, was what got us through thousands and thousands of years. And for me, I think that's part of the attraction to them. That's partly why when I see a field of corn, all I can see is dirt. Or when I see an orange grove with bare sand beneath it, I feel a small amount of sadness. But when I see a diverse field with crops and flowers and trees all mingling together, or even when I see the vast greenness of our own living pathways, I feel, activated, right? There's a reason that we feel a certain way when we're in the woods, right? The Japanese call it forest bathing. We like being in that shade, in those trees, in that diversity. I think deep down, we all long for that diversity within our cropping systems. It's just making it fit a capitalist private land ownership model that makes it practically inaccessible. Like I said earlier this week, it's not that market gardeners don't want to grow crops and diverse interplantings like that. It's that it's hard to make it pay the bills. And the average grower doesn't really have the land or time to justify growing that way. It's good to see those practices are still employed all over the world. And I mean that literally. It feels good to see it. And I hope people feel encouraged to employ some interplanting strategies in your gardens. I think it's important. I think it's fun. It's good for the soil and local ecology. And of course, it's tasty, which is nice. And obviously, as discussed in the last segment, not all crops, like onions, make sense as interplants. And to be sure, that has always been the case to some extent. But diversity always matters. Rotations matter. Growing things in and around other crops matter. It's not a fetishization or glorification of what ancient cultures did, as some people like to say in the comments sometimes. It's a recognition that the style of agriculture, the sort of monoculture style of agriculture that we've leaned into societally here in the U.S. is degrading the environment, our ecology, not to mention human health, dramatically. Also, moreover, these sort of diverse growing practices are not just ancient. They never stopped happening, and they are still being used all over the world. The Milpa study I referenced earlier this week, that study was not some archaeological study. It was a study from 2021 of current growers. Anyway, let me know any thoughts you all have on polyculture culture. Otherwise, let's wrap this thing up. Quick reminder for your weekend, go Cats. Also, go Denmark on Sunday versus Portugal in the second leg. Shouts to you. We'll be rooting you on. because I goofed. You can be my Red Europe team. Don't forget, we are now officially a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors who make this possible. Huge shouts to Willie Breeden for the theme music and the team at No Till Growers. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or sign up in the month of March, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to it's our weeklies: Randall Duran, Alex and Oliver, Stacy Moorman, Bill King, and Chris Yates, and Stephen Smith. So obviously this week the planet has been invaded by a glowing plant that induces a sort of drug-like state that is popular on TikTok. But it turns out that it was not aliens, but just the weeklies who had gotten wrapped up in some next level botany, kind of inspired by some AI stuff. We don't need to get into it. And anyway, they accidentally created a mammalian plant that honestly, when the offspring were born, were pretty darn cute and served as nice pets to the people who had, up until that point, been put into a pleasant, relaxed state for a week or so. Not really sure how I feel about that process, but someone does need to rein in those weeklies a little bit. That could have gotten a little messy. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. Did I already say go Cats? I probably did. I don't think it hurts to say it again. Go Cats. We will see you on Monday. Yeah, have a great weekend. Bye.